Hi, I'm Kevin Haynes, the CEO at Reveal Security, and I'm here with Terry McGraw.
I'm Terry McGraw. I'm the CEO of Cape Endeavors Incorporated.
Terry, man, it's great
Really
to
good
see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, man.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of, I say it's just identity security, and I think about sort of the move to the cloud and sort of that as still ongoing, but there's a lot already there, and kind of the use of SaaS applications,
Absolutely.
and sort of the whole thing around identity, and seems like an explosion of non-human identities. There's an insider, kind of malicious insider that's woke up that day, decided to do something harmful for the organization, or somebody who's got the creds from outside logging in. How do you defend that? Like, what are you seeing? I mean, are you seeing those problems out there, and how do you defend against that?
The reality is, and you and I both know, there is no perimeter anymore. And even companies that have a very large on-presence, still network infrastructure and data centers, et cetera, on almost all situations, they have SaaS applications they're using in combination. So I think every one of my customers is a hybrid solution. So they have SaaS applications, they have on-premise, some combination thereof, or they're all SaaS. And the reality is, it is all about identity and privilege access management and controlling that. That is truly the perimeter now, is around identity and is around privilege access. I don't think that you can rely all on prevention. And we've seen this time and time again. Prevention is great. If you can keep them out, well, that's wonderful. But nation states certainly can find a way in. Cybercrime organizations are very sophisticated, rivaling, in some case, nation state activity. And it really does become denying them the ability to get identities, whether that be service accounts, individual accounts, or privilege accounts, and then laterally moving through that environment through application, using identities, using interconnectivity in SaaS applications, et cetera. So that is still a huge problem. That is the battlefield, and that's the war to be won or lost.
We spent years defending the network, defending the defending the endpoint, and it feels like now we've got to double down on defending basically the identity, right? And if you look at the left-hand side of the MITRE framework, it essentially is all about getting the identity, right? I had a red teamer recently tell me that the application space was their safe space. Once they got the identity, they can sort of dwell in there, recon the organization and those applications, and then sort of go achieve their objectives. If you're able to catch the recon and stop it there, I think you call that a good day, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because the SaaS applications, by design, are opaque to the user, right?
Right.
I mean, you don't have the fidelity or the of the telemetry that's coming out of the application. Understand, what's going on behind your use of the application.
Right.
But it absolutely, the key to whether or not you have an operational impact has to do whether or not you can deny them moving into either data exfiltration stores where they can hold you hostage from the data, or to get into financial information where they can do other types of accounting compromise, or laterally move into other significant systems because they're interconnected, right? You have this identity as privileged in that one, and so you just crosswalk through
once
the environment.
Once you get the token, once that identity has a token,
absolutely.
it's sort of
got one size fits all key.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, it absolutely, to avoid operational impact, you have to deny the adversary that ability to actually gain a foothold and move laterally.
One of the things I've been asked a lot lately is about non-human identities, and I know there's a lot of sort of buzz around that, and I think a lot of it comes from sort of the interest in AI and what's happening there and how that's creating these agentic thing, and then sort of what that means for the identity. There's a couple things that come to mind, just from kind of the operator's chair, which is I don't really want to manage that totally isolated and separate from how I'm managing all my other identities, right? Especially in terms of the detection part of it. When you get into identity detection, sort of trying to stop the adversary or the insider or whatever it may be from doing that harm, you're into the behavioral land, I would say, and a lot of times that can be really noisy land.
Absolutely.
And so the last thing you want to do is create a bunch more false positives for the operators. Are you hearing that? Like, I think there's this attack surface that has it's emerging. It's getting to be more problematic.
And I think to the point where you have non-human identity, it's particularly true like in cloud-based not applications, but even infrastructure. We've always had the challenge of service accounts. They're not often monitored to the same degree that users are and humans and admins are. So you have these service accounts. They're usually given overly broad permissions. They're very often not least privilege. And then you have AI sort of generated identities added to that as non-human. And so you'll see often from telemetry, it'll say user string, and it'll be clearly not a user. It'll be a process, right? But it has permissions, and that permissions is accessing something, and you're like, is that a legitimate process? Is that something I know about? Is it not know about? And you have to take time and go research and figure out like what is that process, what is it, what it should be doing, et cetera. And getting a handle on that and marrying that, because it's not just that. You're having all of that telemetry from you still have your traditional firewall, your traditional EDR, your traditional, your LDAP and all your stuff coming into you. So it can be a hugely noisy environment.
But I don't think Sizzles are getting, a bunch more headcount to go do this.
They're losing headcount. I think you've hit on one of the largest problems that we don't talk enough about, which is alert fatigue and the problem of false positives. You can't ignore them, right? So if you have a trusted solution that's providing you telemetry, and that telemetry says, hey, this is potentially bad, or hey, we think this is bad, you can't ignore that. You are obligated to then go investigate, right? You can't take the chance. So that means that if it's a really noisy solution, you are wasting cycles, overhead, and potentially missing the legitimate problems. And anything you can do to reduce that false positive rate is huge, which is why Reveal is such an amazing product. Actually,
thank you.
I mean, it really does. That's one of the key components that you and I talked about. Is reducing that false positive.
I'm really curious about this because, when you start thinking about the identity, you kind of get into this categorized sort of insider threat versus kind of the outside threat. Oftentimes organizations even have two different organizations that handle those things, and maybe they don't interact a whole lot together. Maybe one has kind of a whole HR element to it, and the other one. When you get to the identity though, it can be an insider, right? It can be a legitimate employee, and we're seeing stuff with North Korea and things like that. So it could be a legitimate employee, right? Just doing something that's harmful to the organization. Or it could be that employee had their credentials,
Absolutely.
We're going to need to mature as an industry about how do we actually work both sides of that. You don't really know until you know.
The problem is that there is no such thing as an outsider anymore. There's outside adversaries, but they're using an inside permission, right? Like Dr. Nestori used to say this, if you're in a cloud, they literally have to get something that's already got credentials and to maximize the access that provides.
Right.
Whether that's convincing a human to click on something, that's harvesting it from a vulnerability, but it's getting that foothold inside the environment. But it is something that has authorization to be there.
Right.
And oftentimes that is overlooked in sources of telemetry because things look normal until they don't.
Yeah.
Right?
So Terry, man, thanks for coming. Great to see you again.
No, it's great to see you.
I can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Absolutely. Likewise, and I wish you all the best, and anything we can do to help, let us know.
Awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate it.